emergency contact? Who should we notify in the case of death? Welcome to the USP, where I've spent the last 2+ decades of my life. You know, there's a theme here as far as you're always going to hear when I was in the shoe, Like I said, I've spent about 45% of my bid locked in a box, locked in a shoe. And someone asked me, like, to take them through how I felt while I'm in there, you know. I don't like being in a cell the size of a bathroom, day in and day out. You know what? The hardest part of it is the first 2 weeks. Because, you know, you're on the compound running around and then, boom, you get into an incident and you're locked up. You know, the longest hours are when they're processing you because they just got you in a holding tank and you're just sitting there. Sometimes it might take you 2 or 3 hours to get to a cell, and sometimes it might take all day because depending on what's going on in the compound and how many people was brought back to get processed. But you know, for me, when I'm in there, I just lay it down. You know, I'm not on the window trying to holler at the CO. I'm not in the window trying to pass kites. You know, if there's people that I need to communicate with or whatever, I do that for that part and then I'm done. But, you know, I was doing 20-something years. So for me, it really didn't matter where I was doing it. My time was still ticking, regardless of how long I stay in the shoe. When I do get out of the shoe, I'm just in a bigger box, you know, the yard. And, you know, thinking back about those times is, it's not emotional where it's just like sad or makes me want to cry or anything like that, but it's just like, it pisses me off. You know, because this last time that I was in the shoe in Florence, when I was waiting to go home, waiting to go to a halfway house, you know, I'm accustomed to, when you go to the shoe, you get wrecked you get wrecked 3 days out of the week for an hour each time, right? And the process used to be that the COs would come and ask you, hey, who wants to sign up for rec? You're being pulled out next. And people would get up on the door and sign up for rec. Well, this last time I was in Florence, the COs that signed you up for rec, they would come at 5 o'clock in the morning. And, you know, throughout the day, throughout the night, when they're counting, they're freaking, like, they do this shit to you on purpose. You know, they'll click their handcuff, click, click. And when you're in a cell in the middle of the night, the little click on the handcuff teeth, when they're pushing the handcuff back in and out, it's like, click, 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 click. It's like the loudest noise ever. You know, it can wake you up from a dead sleep, right? And, you know, the frustration for me is the mentalities, bitch-ass COs that do that. You know, it's like they get a kick out of, you know, getting under your skin or even torturing you. And, you know, they're not in there physically beating me up, but they know that everybody's asleep. It's 2 o'clock in the morning. And when they come in, you know, because every tier that you walk through, you have to go through a gate. So the gate gets buzzed open, bzz, and it clicks. And, you know, when you close it, and it has to be closed behind them before they can walk down the tier. Everything has to be secured. So when they close the gate, they're slamming it. You know, and they're counting every hour on the hour. And, you know, some people, you know, I don't want to just say all them CEOs are a bunch of little bitches, but you get some CEOs that come through and they're respectful, and they go about doing their job. But then there's CEOs that, like I just mentioned, that get a kick out of just little dumb shit that they do because they know it irks you. They know it pisses you off and frustrates you, right? So at this particular time I'm in the shoe, we're trying to figure out how to sign up for rec because we don't have a radio. They don't allow us to have a radio. They don't allow us to have a watch. And so there's no telling what time 5 o'clock in the morning is, because like we missed rec a few times and I'm like, hey man, how do we sign up for rec? Oh, you gotta be standing at the door at 5 o'clock, right? So, all right. So we took turn, like waking up and just trying to gauge what time it is. We count the hours by how many times the CEOs has walked past our tier through the night to count. And we're like, all right, I think the next one is 5 o'clock, right? So one of us would get up and the CEO would come by and we're like, hey man, rec for 2. And they would just look at us and just walk off. And I'm like, what the fuck, right? And then when rec comes, we don't get pulled out and we're like, hey, we signed up for rec this morning. They're like, oh, no, you didn't. No, you didn't. The thing that happened on the compound when the DC killed the Texas dude had nothing to do with the COs. But somehow these bitch-ass COs take it upon them. We're already in the shoe as punishment. We're already in the shoe under investigation. We're locked in our cell. That's our punishment. But some of these bitch-ass COs, they feel like it's their obligation or their duty to continue to punish us. And it took, long story short, to that aspect, it took 2 months being in the shoe before we got our first rec. And me, I like to go to rec. I don't care if it's 6 o'clock in the morning, 6 o'clock in the evening. That's just the way I do my routine. It helps me break up the monotony of being in a cell, for hours and days and weeks on end. It's the same way that I escape from prison by calling my wife every day. It's the same way I break, my routine by going out to rec. So it took us like 2 months before we were able to get rec while we were in the shoe. And, every day there's always something. While we're in the shoe, you hear the door, you hear the commotion, you hear the keys running, and people are coming in. And a couple of days later, you find out, oh, somebody got killed. Somebody else got killed. Like during the 4 months I was in the shoe at that time, after the DC's in the Texas incident, it seemed like there was something in the water. Like everybody was just acting up, and it was hectic. So by the time that they cleared me for my investigation, I came back on the compound. But when I came back on the compound, the prison was locked down. And I discovered that we were pending a congressional review, meaning that Washington, D.C. had ordered the prison to be locked down and conducted their own investigation as far as why the level of violence was the way it was there in a penitentiary. I can tell you, but it's common sense. You got a bunch of freaking violent offenders locked in a box with no routine, with no avenue to release their energy. And what I mean is that prison is slammed down as far as it's split. You can only go to certain rec here and there. You can only go to education here and there. And every little thing that goes on, even if there's nothing going on, the prison never calls the movement on time. So you got a lot of people that really is trying to escape the environment by occupying themselves with something else to do, but they're not able to because these guys don't know how to run the prison. You know, and it gets to a point where, you know, when you're able to do your routine, you can escape the environment for a little bit because you're focused on studying the law, out down at the law library, researching something. You're focused on being at rec, you know, working out, getting your exercise in, playing ball or whatever. But the way Florence was, you were mainly stuck in the block. And the block is where a lot of shit pops off because you're just in there around each other. It's noisy. And sooner or later, somebody's going to say something to somebody that somebody doesn't feel like is kosher. And it blows up. So when I get out, we're locked down. And they're only letting us out for 30 minutes a day to shower and use the phone. And we're back in our cell. And at the same time, I'm waiting for a halfway house. Because now I've already fought the warrants that they try to put on me. Because, you know, before I went to the SHU, I was supposed to have been home, or at least at the halfway house, August 10, 2021. And now it's December already, right? And they put charges on me. They put 5 charges on me. Robbery charge, kidnapping charge, attempted murder charge, possession of a firearm charge. And I had to fight the case while I was in the SHU under an investigation for homicide. So I got all that cleared. They violated my Fast and Speedy Trial Act because back in 2001 when I went to Lompoc, I knew I had outstanding state cases. So I filed a pro se motion for the state of Utah to come and address the issue, to come and get me, take me to court and resolve the issue. But they never replied. Well, it turned out that the prosecutor in the state of Utah, when he received my motion and he saw that it was pro se, he didn't want to honor it because he just felt like, oh, it's just an inmate writing a motion to him. It didn't come from an attorney. But the law says I can represent myself. You know, and everything that I wrote down, I had copies of. It was in my file. It was in the court records. So when they put charges on me on my way home, I was forced to get a lawyer because, you know, I'm not able to research the case. I'm not able to communicate on the phone the way I want to because we're locked down. And fortunately, you know, I had Deirdre Gorman, who represented me on my appeal from when I first caught my bid. And throughout the course of the last 20 years, we remained friends. And I contacted her. And she was like, don't worry, I got you. I'll be there at court to represent you. And, you know, we got all of the records, and it showed that I filed all my motions while I was in Lompoc back in 2001 for the state to settle this matter. And the prosecutor took it upon themselves to ignore me. And we used and it turned out that they violated my Fast and Speedy Trial Act, and they had to dismiss my case. So I went on a video call while I was in the SHU, and they dropped off my case. 2 months later after that, I got released back to the compound. They cleared me for the incident with the DCs in the Texas. So now I'm waiting for a halfway house, you know. My counselor comes through, say, hey, I'm going to put you in for the halfway house. We should hear back in a few weeks. Well, a month goes by, I don't hear anything back. So I knock on the window when she does her round. And I'm like, hey, what's going on with my halfway house? You know, have you heard anything back? She's like, well, you know, it's unusual. I've never seen this done before. I was like, what are you talking about? The halfway house doesn't want you. I'm like, what do you mean the halfway house doesn't want me? How do they have a choice if they want me or not? I've done my time. Your law says I'm eligible for a year halfway house. If I've done more than 10 years, I'm eligible for a year halfway house. I've done over 20 years. I'm eligible for a year halfway house. And I'm asking her, what's the problem? And she's like, well, they're not saying anything, but, it might have something to do with your case, the level of violence on my case. I'm in there for a bank robbery. And then I had assaulted a CO while I was in the county jail that caught me 8 more years. But through the course of my time in the penitentiary, I've gotten my share of shots and been involved in my share of incidents. But, they had a dude that just got released before me. He was in there for a body. He did 30 years and went to a halfway house, got a year halfway house, and he has a body. And I'm just like, you just released somebody that had a body on their case. So I don't have a body on my case. So what's the problem? He's like, I can't tell you. The halfway house doesn't want you. So I'm trying to understand how the halfway house can deny something that Congress has said that I have coming. And, we went back and forth or whatever, but at the end of the day, the Utah halfway houses, whoever's working over there, they're a bunch of bitches, didn't want me. So that was the end of that. And then the unit team comes in and goes, well, if you got another place to go, we'll try to send you there. So my mind started, turning. I got some friends that were from Texas. They're like, hey man, you can use my address, go to my girl's place or go to my family's place and go to the halfway house out in Texas. But, I ain't never been to Texas, and I'm not trying to go to Texas, but I have in-laws in Denver. My wife's family lives in Denver. So I call my wife, I say, hey, ask Christy, which is her sister, if I can come over there. I need an address. I'm trying to come over to the halfway house in Colorado. And of course, my sister is like, yeah, she can come over here. So we went through the process. The probation officers went to review the place, her residence, and checked everything out and everything. And then we cleared me and we filed the paperwork to the halfway house. So we filed the paperwork to the halfway house in Colorado. And I waited for another couple months before I got a response. So after a couple months, I asked my counselor, hey, what's going on? Did they accept me? And she just looked at me with a confused look on her face, because, her job is to put people in the halfway house. And everybody that she recommends a halfway house goes to a halfway house. I don't know if she was telling the truth, but she was saying that my case was the first case that the halfway house refused them. And she comes back and she's like, well, Colorado's not accepting you. I said, why not? I've never been in Colorado. I've never done anything in Colorado. She goes, look, I can't explain it. They're not giving me any reasons, but the halfway house are not accepting you. And that fucked me up, because for the last year leading up to my release date, as far as the halfway house time, I had hopes. I had hopes to see my wife. I had hopes to be out here to eat some of the foods that I've been missing. I was just so anxious to get out of the environment that I was in. And it seemed like, the last year that I was in there, everything was turned up a notch. Everything was escalating. And it was just, sooner or later, I'm going to find myself in the mix. The chance of that is very high. And I know that. So I was really getting desperate to just escape the environment. But after this last time, they're like, after they told me that the Colorado halfway house wouldn't accept me, I knew I was stuck for the next 6 months before August came back around, And, it was frustrating because I haven't done anything not to get a halfway house. The last 5 years of my bid, I was a model inmate. I didn't get in trouble. I stayed out the way. I got into, little confrontation here and there, but it was nothing where the CEOs knew about it or got locked up for, But, like right now in Florence, they're on lockdown. Shit just keeps going off, popping off, and when I just got some pictures from one of my young homie that's still incarcerated. He's in a Victorville FCI. Now I said FCI, but out in California, they have 2 FCIs, FCI 1, FCI 2, and a USP. But all 3 of those yards are just like a USP. They're gang banging, they're getting it in. People are getting butchered in those FCIs too. And when I got his picture, he still got about 10 years left to do. He got a 30-year sentence on a body. And I got emotional because like in the picture, he's smiling and he's in there with the group of, the people that's in there with him and they're posing for the picture and all that. But it was just, it brings back memories of the times that I was in there. And I know what the homie's going through at this time. And that shit saddens me because, that place is not a place that I wish my worst enemy to be, let alone somebody I care about. Welcome to the USP.